All right, so today we're going to talk about something kind of surprising. It's this hidden force that helps communities do more than just survive disasters. It actually helps them become stronger, right in the immediate aftermath. It's a phenomenon that's hiding in plain sight. You know this feeling, right? You're leaving a massive concert, or maybe a big protest, or a championship game. There are thousands of you all swaying together, singing the same words. And for a minute, you feel deeply connected to all those strangers. You're part of something way bigger than just yourself. So, what on earth does that concert buzz have to do with surviving a disaster? Well, it turns out that exact same energy, that feeling of connection, might just be the single most powerful tool a community has when a hurricane makes landfall or an earthquake hits. The question is, how? To really get this, we've got to start with a puzzle, something that has baffled emergency managers for decades. It's this completely counterintuitive truth about what people actually do when a crisis hits. You'd think it would be total chaos, right? Every person for themselves, panic in the streets. But what actually happens in the moments and hours after a disaster is often the complete opposite. You see this sudden, almost shocking sense of unity and cooperation. Okay, so take a look at this. The contrast here is it's really stark. In the left column, you've got normal times. Little suspicion, everyone kind of looking out for number one. But then look at the right, the aftermath. All those barriers just crumble. Crime rates plummet. Neighbors who've never said a word to each other are suddenly organizing rescue teams. All those social and class lines, they just seem to dissolve in the face of a shared goal, survival. So, what is this? What is this invisible social glue that just suddenly snaps everyone together? It's more than just adrenaline. It actually has a name, and a sociologist figured it out more than 100 years ago. And it's got this fantastic name, collective effervescence. A French sociologist, Émile Durkheim, came up with this way back in 1912. He used it to describe that electric feeling, that buzz that happens when a group of people are all focused on the same thing, feeling the same emotion. It's the magic in the crowd. And this simple arrow, this says it all, doesn't it? Collective effervescence makes the boundary between your individual self, the me, and the group, the we, incredibly soft. It's like for a moment, you stop being just you and you become part of this larger, single organism. So here's the magic trick. How does this build trust, instantly? Well, a disaster gives everyone a single, powerful thing to focus on. All the normal social rules go out the window. When you and a stranger are both trying to lift a fallen tree off a car, you're not asking them who they voted for. You are perfectly synchronized in a shared purpose, and that creates this deep, gut-level trust that's absolutely essential for that neighbor-to-neighbor response that saves the most lives way before any official help can show up. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? As powerful as this spark is, it's also incredibly fragile. It doesn't last. So let's take a look at how this emotional journey usually plays out. Disaster researchers have actually mapped this out, and it's a real emotional roller coaster. Right after the crisis, you hit that peak, the therapeutic community phase. That's when collective effervescence is at its most powerful. But then, look at the timeline. Bureaucracy starts to return, insurance adjusters show up, the old divisions and inequalities start creeping back in. And that's when the disillusionment phase hits, and that beautiful sense of unity starts to crack. So that leads to the million-dollar question, right? If this spark is so vital but disappears so fast, can we, bottle it? Can we do something to build that community's strength before everything goes wrong? Well, the answer is a definite yes. Smart emergency management isn't just about stockpiling supplies. It's about building social infrastructure. Programs like the Community Emergency Response Teams, or CERT, they're not really about learning to tie a tourniquet. They're about getting neighbors to solve problems together, to build those relationships and that trust before the emergency. So when the power grid fails, that network of familiar faces is already there, ready to go. And this is maybe the most important part. You just can't fake this stuff. Trust has to be authentic. When a politician only shows up for a photo op after the floodwaters recede, it doesn't build trust, it builds cynicism. Communities know the difference. You can't just flip a switch and manufacture this feeling when you need it. It has to grow organically. Okay, so if you can't fake it, how do the communities that really succeed, how do they keep that powerful sense of connection alive for the long haul? How do you keep the spark from fading? Well, they get really intentional about it. It's not an accident. They create rituals like annual commemorations to not just remember the loss, but to remember and regenerate that feeling of unity. They turn the informal help that popped up during the crisis into permanent things, like tool libraries or community gardens that keep people working together. And maybe most importantly, they tell the stories, over and over, of how people helped each other, reinforcing that core belief, we are a community that takes care of our own. But we have to be honest here. There's a dark side to this powerful force, an uncomfortable truth we have to face. The very same energy that creates a warm, inclusive circle of we also draws a line. And on the other side of that line is them. And this is the critical equity challenge. We have to ask, who is being left outside that circle of we? After Hurricane Katrina, for instance, we saw incredible examples of collective effervescence, of neighbors rescuing neighbors. But that circle often had clear racial and economic boundaries. That therapeutic community was a reality for some people, but it was completely out of reach for others, especially in the most marginalized communities. True resilience has to mean making that circle of we as wide and as inclusive as humanly possible. So that's really what this all boils down to. This electric force of human connection, it's one of the most powerful resources we have. It can literally save lives and rebuild entire cities. But we can't just take it for granted. The real question this leaves us with is one for our own communities. Are we actively and intentionally building these bonds now, in the quiet times? Or are we just sitting back, waiting for the next disaster to do the work for us?